We may be living in the last days, but the apostles living 2,000 years ago thought so too. So, are we correct in a futurist interpretation of Bible prophecy? Welcome to SkyWatch TV, a special broadcast for Thursday, March 2nd, 2017. I'm Derek Gilbert, joining me via Skype from La La Land.
Where there is not much sunlight. Get it?
That's
versus moonlight.
Gotcha. He is the award-winning author, the award-winning screenwriter of the film To End All Wars, and the author of several series of fiction that we recommend because there is biblical truth contained in them. Although, as we're finding out in recent days, we all within the body of Christ have different interpretations sometimes of what exactly that means. The author of the Chronicles of the Nephilim series, Chronicles of the Watcher series, and a brand new series. His first novel is titled Tyrant, Rise of the Beast, Chronicles of the Apocalypse. We welcome Brian Godawa to SkyWatch TV. Brian, good to see you this morning.
Great to see you again too, Derek.
The novel Tyrant, Rise of the Beast, you're dealing with a prophetic topic here, but unlike most of us who will write about the end times as a future event and write from a nonfiction perspective, you're writing in a fictional setting and with a slightly different perspective. Describe the novel.
Yeah, Tyrant, Rise of the Beast, which really just came out this month, is kind of the culmination of, well over, I don't know, maybe 15 or more years of me studying the issue of prophecy and such. And yeah, you're right. To give it away right up front to the Skywatch viewers, it's definitely a minority viewpoint called preterism, but it's within the pale of orthodoxy. Many godly theologians and scholars throughout the years have argued for preterism. So it's not the usual viewpoint that you guys are going to hear on Skywatch. And I'm a fan of you guys and a fan of Derek and Josh. So we have had a lot of interaction over the last year or so, a little bit about this kind of issue. But yeah, left behind, this is not. And I do realize, there's actually a big market for writing fictional novels based on interpreting the Book of Revelation because, let's face it, it's fantastic. It's very fascinating, and sci-fi speculative storytelling is very popular and very fascinating and interesting. So there are already a lot of novels out there with more of the futuristic scenario, which is what makes mine so unique and different is I'm writing about the origin of the Book of Revelation when the Apostle John wrote it in the 1st century. And yeah, I do have a different interpretation that I apply most of it to that time period, but there is a context that I think anyone who loves the Book of Revelation, the context in which the book was written, I think it's a very informative and historical help to understanding the meaning of the symbolism when you understand a lot of the surrounding, things that were going on at the time, like during, Nero's reign and
cultural
such.
References that the writers of the epistles would have understood, and certainly that John would have understood.
Yeah. Take, for instance, the 7 churches, and I mean, of course, there's many interpretations of all these different things, but there's certainly plenty of scholars argue that no matter what you interpret, there is, the 7 churches are still rooted in some kind of historical reality. Because I mean, as I believe, John was writing to actual churches, and we have the trail of the churches. The letters follow a circular pattern around Asia Minor, where they traveled, itinerant preachers and such. So nevertheless, a lot of what John is writing to these churches was very relevant in that time period, and it gives you some insight into the demonic evil as well as where the Christian church was at that time.
Now, the term preterism is something that many viewers may not be familiar with. Could define that versus preterism versus futurism?
Yeah, the word preterism is basically a Latin word that means in the past, and the basic notion is that it's the belief that prophecies have been fulfilled in the past, not in the future. Now, be careful when you use that term because there's all different kinds of preterism. There are some people who believe that all the prophecies were fulfilled in the past, even the return of Christ and the resurrection, and that's called full preterism. I'm not in that camp. That's a little too extreme for me. But on the other side, we have to realize that there's a sense in which everyone is preterist in the sense that all Christians believe that there are some prophecies that have been fulfilled in the past, right? Like the messianic prophecies, of course, right? Those have been fulfilled in the past. So there's a sense in which it's a continuum of what prophecies were already fulfilled and what have yet to be fulfilled. But when you use the term preterism as like I would do that's my viewpoint. What I'm basically saying is a lot or most of the book of Revelation and a lot of the prophecies that many people nowadays think are in our future have actually been fulfilled in the past. And that some people think that's heresy. In fact, I used to think it was, and it's certainly controversial. But circling back to the book, Tyrant, Rise of the Beast, I'm writing about the first century when Nero started the persecutions. And there are different theories about when the book of Revelation was written. Many believe it was written in the time of Domitian, but there are also scholars who argue that it was written in the time of Nero before 70 AD. And the reason why this is really important is because understanding the Neronic persecutions of the Christian church and where that led to the Jewish revolt as well in 66 AD, which ultimately culminated in the Roman armies coming to Jerusalem, coming to Israel and conquering Israel, destroying the holy city and destroying the holy temple, which of course still lays bare to this day. This event is a seminal event in my viewpoint in the book, in the series. It's going to be a trilogy, but also in the preterist view, because it's a very important event that a lot of Christians don't know about, that basically embodies the final historical end of the old covenant, the end of the age. That's what we see the end of the age as, is the end of the old covenant era with the final consummation of the new covenant entering into history. Yes, it began at Christ's death and resurrection, but it was consummated at the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, because that was the final destruction of the earthly elements of the old covenant. That the spiritual elements were done away with in Christ, a generation earlier. That's the kind of the basic big picture, But my goal in writing the book was, no matter what end times belief you have, you can still really enjoy the story, because I wanted to make it historically accurate in that time period. And think about it. This is we know a lot about the book of Acts, but there's a lot that we don't know from the book of Acts to that, onward, or till, I don't know, the Middle Ages. So a lot of times we don't know a lot about that time period.
Right.
And this event is very significant. Many Bible researchers and studiers will know about Josephus, the famous Jewish historian, and he's one of the only extensive writers on the topic of the fall of Jerusalem and the temple in AD 70 under the Roman armies. So no matter what view you have, it still happened in history, and it's a fascinating, truly fascinating story with wars, battles, etc. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring in the supernatural worldview that we see in Revelation. For those who've read my previous series, Chronicles of the Nephilim, I was kind of following the divine council paradigm of Michael Heiser and the Watchers, and trying to integrate that with Nephilim and how that all played out through the Old Testament and up into the New. And now in this series, I think that the Book of Revelation is the most supernatural book in the New Testament, with all these amazing demonic and angelic things going on. And I wanted to show, well, what would it be like for that? What would that look like behind the scenes as well, while the apostles are basically being martyred, the church is being attacked, Nero is the emperor, and the Jews are also starting to rise up against Rome. So it's this fascinating picture. And that was sort of my goal. Yes, there's a definite viewpoint of prophecy and how it plays out in the first century, but I love the history of it, and I think anybody will be able to appreciate that.
That's one of the things I like about the book. And you mentioned Dr. Michael Heiser. He's been very influential on my worldview as well. I know Josh here would agree. And similar to the fiction of Dr. Heiser in his novels, which he refers to as faction, which is based on history. You're using a lot of footnotes in this novel. I'm only up to the 10th chapter, and I think I just read footnote number 120. But what I thought was really interesting is that when I'm going to these footnotes, I'm having to rabbit trail, and that's why it's taking me longer to read. Because, for example, the heresy of the Colossians, and this concept that you bring into the novel through a rabbi who's leading a synagogue there, who engages in something called Merkaba, which is a type of mysticism. I didn't know anything about this, and yet you footnote it and show Bible scholars who say this may be the source of the reference in Paul's letter to the worship of angels and so forth. Talk a little bit about that. Some of the cultural or social references that you incorporate into the novel Tyrant that we probably don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, the Chronicles of the Nephilim series, one of the things that made it so popular was so much of what I was writing was unique, new, fresh, and many Christians I was worried would be freaked out by it. Giants, watchers, come on, really? Now, obviously not the SkyWatch crowd. You guys are familiar, but there's many who wouldn't in the evangelical world. And I was thinking, I come from it's like, you got to be careful. Don't play fast and loose with the Bible, right? So I had written appendices on each of the novels to explain the biblical and historical research, because I knew it was so wild, people would be questioning it. Well, it turned out a lot of Christians love that stuff. They loved it as much as the novel. So now imagine I'm going to write about the Apostle John, the book of Revelation, a lot of controversy, and there's a lot of debate on it, right? So I knew that this crowd who already loves research, if I write a novel, and by the way, I admit, I know footnotes in a novel is anathema. It's,
I want entertainment. Don't make me think.
Exactly. And also, it's just, if you can't tell a story well enough, then why are you bothering with footnotes? I agree with all that. The only reason why I put footnotes in, because this particular issue of Bible prophecy and all this stuff, again, people are so committed to their views. I know that they're going to read this and they're going to have a lot of questions. Where did he get that? Is he making that up? And because they tend to love research, I said, well, I'll just provide the research for them. I could have just slapped it all at the end, but I figured, no, these are the kind of people who they'll probably read through and they'll go back again and they'll say, I want to see exactly where he got that. And so I actually footnoted it by paragraphs, mostly. And so that's for those people who do want to go into it more depth, but you really don't have to. You can skip over the footnotes and go back later if you want.
Yeah, fascinating stuff in there. Now, the one issue that I always thought was a strong argument against a preterist or even partial preterist view of prophecy is that the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 by the legions under Titus was such a catastrophic and traumatic event in the national history or the ethnic history of the Jews that it certainly would have been included in the Bible. I mean, somewhere in there if it were a past event. Now, having said that, most scholars will place the authorship of the book of Revelation somewhere in the 90s, in John's old age. How do you address that? I mean, how do adherents of the partial preterist view account for that?
Well, first of all, I found even in researching and trying to write this book, it's amazing how little we actually do know about a lot of things, even about the apostles. Where did they die?
Yeah.
Did Peter really die in Rome? Yeah. Was Peter ever really in Rome?
Did Paul ever make it to Spain? Yeah, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, did he make it? And of course, we at the end of the day, we don't know. So I did my best to find out things. And quite frankly, there's a lot of, you might call them legends or traditions, let's put it that way, traditions in Christian history with things like, the Apostle John was boiled in oil and he survived. And, there's a lot of stuff that's very questionable or just, we don't really know. But I wanted to use a lot of what is in the tradition and incorporate that in because, I respect the tradition and it may not, maybe Peter wasn't crucified upside down, but that's a tradition and it has, it has some legitimacy to it. And so I tried to incorporate all that material into there. But in the course of that, that's where I really discovered, like, look, we got to do our best and figure out, what evidence supports our views. There's a wonderful book on my website, Godawa.com. Go to the Chronicles of the Apocalypse section, and I provide scholarship for scholarly articles as well as free books that are online that you can get. And the classic book that explains, that makes the argument for the early date of Revelation is Before Jerusalem Fell by Ken Gentry. And if you're going to interact with the issue, you have to interact with that book. And many people already have, but he makes the argument that the strongest notion for Revelation being written before the fall would be that there would be some kind of reference to it after the fact, because that's very strong. They do that about the resurrection, right, in the Gospels and stuff. But you're right. Nevertheless, there's most scholarship actually argues it was written in the time of Domitian. So there are those issues. But at the end of the day, if we're really honest, if you read enough of the scholarship, you have to say there are good arguments on both sides, and you're going to have to commit to what you think are the best. But you also have to be open-minded, which includes myself. If it was written after AD 70, the Book of Revelation was written after AD 70, that would be a strong argument against my system. And I have no problem with having a falsifiable belief system. The problem is if you have a system that you keep changing and you can never falsify it, well, then how can you ever prove it's right? And that would be my reverse challenge. Yeah.
And we've run across a few of those here in recent days. Well, Brian, we tell viewers that there will be an extended version of this interview. We're going to continue on with sort of the post-interview interview on my personal podcast called A View from the Bunker. You'll find the audio version at vftb.net. The video version will be posted at my personal YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Derek Gilbert. That will be going up in a couple of weeks, as we're holding a once-a-week schedule on that podcast. But wanted to give you a taste of this. It's a book that entertains. You get to see. And I appreciate the fact that much of the dialogue that you put in the mouths of the apostles, like Peter, Paul, and John, is taken directly from their epistles and from the book of Acts. So while there's some creative license there, it's not straying way off the reservation. And I also think it's cool that one of the lead characters in the novel is Apollyon, who certainly is going to play a key role in the end times as well. But we'll talk about, in the extended version of the interview, Matthew 24, and how the partial preterist view addresses the abomination of desolation and other things that futurists will interpret as future events. Brian Godawa, award-winning Hollywood screenwriter, the movie that he won the award for, To End All Wars, with Kiefer Sutherland and Robert Carlyle, both excellent actors, but also some fiction that you'll find at his website that we highly recommend, because they explain the divine council worldview and the fact that we're in the middle of a spiritual war with literal supernatural entities who want to kill you and everyone you love. Godawa.com, Godawa.com. Brian, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Derek.
You've been fighting in a war against an enemy you've been told doesn't even exist. SkyWatchTV wants to change that to prepare you for the battles ahead. Beginning March 7th, exclusively from SkyWatchTV, the Cosmic War Collection finally arrives. Featuring 3 groundbreaking books, a 5-hour DVD, and a 7-hour audio series showing you how real the supernatural War of Kingdoms actually is. Reversing Hermon by acclaimed Bible and ancient language scholar Dr. Michael S. Heiser. And The Great Inception by SkyWatchTV's Derek P. Gilbert. You'll learn how Christ's full mission has been misunderstood for 2,000 years. Not only did he come to shed his blood to redeem mankind, Jesus was on a mission to reverse the sin of the angelic watchers who descended on Mount Hermon. You'll also discover how Bible stories you've known since childhood were literal battles in the spirit realm between God and the gods who rebelled. When you order the Cosmic War Collection from SkyWatchTV, you'll receive Reversing Hermon by Dr. Michael S. Heiser, The Great Inception by Derek P. Gilbert, a new, exclusive, never-before-offered deluxe hardcover collector's edition of the Book of Enoch, The Real Clash of the Titans DVD, a special, never-before-released video compilation with 5 hours of teaching on the long war between God and the gods. And The Unseen Adversary, a brand new audio series on MP3 disc with 7 hours of Derek P. Gilbert interviewing Dr. Michael Heiser on the Watchers, UFOs, and the Great Cosmic Rebellion of Satanic Forces. A value of more than $100, yours for just $29.95. The Cosmic War Collection, available beginning March 7th only from SkyWatchTV. Know your enemy. Order the Cosmic War Collection beginning March 7th by calling 844-750-4985 or log on to skywatchtvstore.com.